Welcome to another episode of B2B Startup Growth. I'm Shoham, and in this podcast, I aim to share with you wisdom from some of the smartest B2B startup leaders and professionals that I know. We talk about all aspects of marketing, sales, growth hacking, life hacking, and everything in between. So thank you very, very much for joining me.
Happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
Listen, I'm really excited about interviewing you. You can guess. And I was planning to ask you first a question, and I actually gave you some hints about it. And I was consulting with a friend today. We had a meetup for a penguin meetup today.
That's awesome.
Physical one with people physically meeting.
That's great.
And I told them that I was going to be talking to Kipp Bodnar today. And everybody said, wow. And I told them that one of the things that I wanted to ask him was about your superpowers of how such a young person like you got such a job. And they said to me, oh, that's too much to ask in the beginning. He's probably going to be too shy and modest to answer that. And I said to myself, well, you don't get to be a HubSpot CMO if you're really shy. So
shy is not something I've really been accused of much in my life.
Okay, so good. So I decided to ask you anyway, because you got, I mean, maybe the dream job of aspiring marketers in the world. And I'm sure there's some secret sauce that you possess that helped you get there. Can you guess what it would be if others would be talking about you?
Yeah, that's I like that framing. Like, what would other people say? And first of all, I'm very lucky. I have the best job in the whole world. I get to work with an amazing team at HubSpot on the marketing side, but also just the best community in the world of just really passionate partners, customers, fans, people who are just trying to learn and get better at their craft. It is the best. To answer your question directly, I would say, I think if you talked with the folks that are probably spent the most time with me, I think they would say I'm a very principles-driven person. I'm logical, and I use principles to make decisions. And so I don't make overly emotional decisions. I look at what the opportunities are, and I do that. I am not afraid to make bold decisions. I look at marketing as kind of like a growth stage venture capitalist, where your whole job is to have asymmetrical returns, do a program, make an investment that's going to get 10x, 20x the results, not a couple programs that are going to get 1x the result. And so you have a lot of failures when you do that, right? You have some things that, go negative instead of positive, but that's okay, because the ones that go positive are positive exponentially more than the ones that are negative, and kind of balance all that out. And I think that is part of it. And I think the last thing is, like, I'm just obsessed about hiring amazing people. I think anybody in this world is in a situation as a leader because of the amazing people that they work with. And I think the leader's most important job, outside of clearly communicating and articulating a strategy, is to have the right people and bring them together on that common mission.
So do you have any special way how you manage to identify the best people? Do you have any tips on when you interview somebody, how do you identify that this is a really gold kind of marketer that you really want on your team?
Yeah. So I think, for me, again, it all comes back to being very principle driven. And, I think most people hire, leaders or team members based on the work they've done in the past. Their experience is the biggest criteria, because people are looking for predictability. Like, oh, they've done it over here, then they can do it with me, and they can do it well. And I just fundamentally believe that's a flawed way of thinking about hiring. I believe that hiring is about somebody's potential and aptitude to solve problems, their ability to basically collaborate, solve problems, and achieve greatness. One of the questions I love to get everybody's answer to is, imagine you were in a room with 300 strangers. It's just you, 300 strangers in a room. What is the thing that you would be better at than those 300 people in that room? And I've gotten amazing answers to that question. Oh, I'm a concert pianist, so I know I would be better at that. I have written articles that have been read by millions of people, so I know I'd be better at writing, right? There's all kinds of ways, and they need to have some verification of like, oh, hey, this is why I think that would be great. And that's 50% of the equation. 50% of the equation is like, oh, does somebody really understand what it's like to build a skill, learn something, and be very good at something? Then the other thing in marketing that gets overlooked is the ability to simplify things, the ability to take really complex things and simplify them. So the second part of that discussion is let's use a concert pianist, for example. I don't know the first thing about playing the piano. Maybe you do. I don't know if your
I actually
music
played for years, but
yeah,
I'm not great.
so I've never played the piano. And so that's the perfect opportunity to say, great, can you explain to me how to play the piano? Can you explain to me how that works? And do they make it really complex? And do they talk about the notes and the bars and all everything, or do they break it down into very understandable segments for somebody who has no baseline of knowledge? And if they can do that, wow, you have the ability to accomplish great things, and you have the ability to explain those in a really clear way. You're good. Like, marketing is not rocket science, right? It is problem solving, it is listening, it is all those things. And you're going to find people have a base set of skills who can do that and do that very well, I think.
Okay, I could go on on this, but I have a full agenda on a slightly different direction. So I'm going to
Please.
pause on that direction, which I love. I wish I'll talk to you some other time about that.
Of course.
But I really want to talk to you about some of the challenges that are more unique and maybe really, really on the top of mind of marketers nowadays in Q3 2022. And maybe we could start this by asking you, as CMO of HubSpot, what are the unique challenges that you are facing right now? What are the on top of your mind as a CMO? Looking forward at these times that we're experiencing, what's unique about the challenges you're looking at now?
Yeah, so I think there's a few things, right? If you're leading a team, not just if you're a marketing leader, if you kind of really are any leader, I think there's some specific marketing things that I'll get into in a second. But at the macro level, you have a really unstable macroeconomic climate, and that's actually the biggest challenge. When the global economy knows things are good, it kind of knows what to do. When it knows how bad things are, it knows what to do. When it doesn't know how bad or how good something is, then it sits on the sideline and people kind of wait and sit back until they get some certainty. And I think if you're a leader right now, navigating this time of uncertainty, which, from my perspective is going to last a little while before we really have a clear, long-term economic view, I think is really hard, right? Because it's hard to think about budget predictability. I think it's hard to plan demand, customer growth, all of those things. And so I think that is very, very hard. And that's probably the number one thing on everybody's mind. And if it's not, then you're in a really good situation. And that's awesome. Beyond that, if you're thinking about marketing specifically, I think data privacy is, huge, basically channel saturation / data privacy. The fact that, a lot of companies were built on really awesome ad products from Google and Facebook and the like. But wow, the costs of those ads have ballooned because of competition. And the ability to track those ads is getting harder, right? So every day that marches on, ads get more expensive and tracking gets worse, and that's a really hard thing. And so you need to focus then more on your systems, your data, your alignment, having the right first party data for targeting, a lot of different things that I think classically somebody in marketing didn't have to worry about as much. All those things have always been important, but they haven't been like the things. And I think those are top of mind for, we recently had our event Inbound in Boston, had a ton of folks in town. And that was definitely a topic that was hot on everybody's mind.
Right. So I don't know if I'm sure there's I'm imagining these secret conversations in HubSpot going on behind the scenes to address this. So I wonder which parts of this you can share. Maybe you can share what you see other companies are doing, dealing with this big challenge of attributing or really tracking the things that are not easy to track in attribution software.
Yeah, so at Inbound, we rolled out customer journey analytics, which is our core product. You know, we released a ton of, honestly, features around this in terms of data quality features, customer journey analytics, easier to customize custom objects so that you can have a CRM and a database that really matches your business and how you go to market, right? And those are our answers, but at the same time, like, those are product answers, and they're just product answers, and you still have to have the right playbook for gathering first party data. As a marketer, you need to still leverage all of them to actually do attribution, to clean your data, to append the right data so you can segment, target, whether it be for ads, whether it be for email marketing, direct mail, whatever that may be. That's where what we're trying to do is give everybody the foundations to be able to do that.
Cool. So that is great. And this is my daily struggle is very often like this. Okay. Comes a marketing leader to Penguin, and they tell us that now more than before, they need to bring in the leads. Right? They need quick wins. They want to focus on the quick wins. Okay. I mean, I'm consulting with you. Okay. What should I do?
Free of charge.
They want the leads. Bring me the leads. Okay. And they come to us and we explain to them that whatever acquisition cost you $200 last year, it's probably going to cost you now $300.
Yeah.
And we also explained to them that just doing high intent campaigns is not necessarily going to bring them a lot more leads. And then we go on and we explain to them all the logic of why this is a really good time to invest in demand generation and in content and in education and building their brand. And the most typical answer that we get, and this is really unfortunate, and I'm just really crying over your shoulder about this now. The common answer that I get from the marketers is, I know, I agree with you totally. This is a time to invest in demand generation, but I can't afford it because my sales and my managers are pressing me to bring in the leads, give me people to call, give me the inbound leads to call. I can't afford to do what you're saying, although it makes sense. So do you have any advice for me or for the marketer who believes in this and needs to stand up to their managers on how to convince them that although they've been taught for a decade that everything in marketing, they need to measure ROI, measure the conversion rate, measure every dollar that you invest in marketing to see how it converts. And despite all that, I now suggest to them to invest in brand awareness, brand recognition, authority, demand gen. Any thoughts about how to help us convey that?
Yeah, so I mean, look, there's a whole host of things here. First of all, let's talk about why. Why are costs up? Why does it cost $300 instead of $200 for that lead today? Because of more capital in the market, increased competition, right? And so if one of your first principles is, wow, in my market, no matter what my market is in the world, there is more competition and more money, how am I going to win? You would first say, well, I need to do demand generation. Trust me, we're about to get into that. But before, I also have to obsess about differentiation. If I am not different in this category, then unless I am the person with the most money and the most customers, I'm going to lose. Sameness only favors the person with the most resources, or the team, the company with the most resources, right? And if you're not that, and most people aren't that, then you have to say, how am I going to position my company, my brand, my product in a highly differentiated way? So the first thing I would tell anybody is, how are you differentiating from your competitors, right? Because what you're probably doing right now is you're doing just what you said, very high intent. you're doing direct response ads, you're optimizing your website and product pages, and you're doing some email marketing probably. Those are all great things to do. You should do those things, but they're necessary but not sufficient. And if the pressure is in the here and now, it's going to take you a little while to spin up some of the stuff we're about to talk about. But if you can reposition your business and differentiate, then you're going to get conversion rate improvements and all those things you're currently doing. And that's going to start to build a bridge to the future around where you can go. And once you kind of get your head around that, and you and the executive team align on how to position this business in a differentiated way in your category, then you can start rolling that out and start leveraging that with sales and within your marketing to get conversion rate increases, which is always what you do in the short term. If you have a today or this week problem, you have to fix conversion rates. The problem is that every business out there, if you're a marketer and you're listening, you want to pause this show for a second and go look at your analytics. What you will find is that the highest source of your lead is also likely your least cost effective. That is the truth for most people in the world. And you have to say, oh, it is a moral imperative for that to not be true. If that is true, then we will never scale and we will never be successful, right? Because we're going to hit diminishing returns, and the unit economics, the cost of customer acquisition are going to get way too bad. We're just not going to be able to do that. And so if that's the case, and you say, great, well, I have to have some of my biggest demand generation channels also be my most cost-effective and highest ROI channels. And that's where search engine content, YouTube, other channels really come in to make that happen. And that is where you have to focus your time. And I think the biggest challenge for most folks out there, the last thing I'd say is sometimes it requires like a new motion. It's not as simple as like creating content. It's like, oh, I'm creating this content, and then people are going to consume that content, and then they're going to download an ebook, or they're going to attend a special event or whatever, things that we don't do that much of right now. We have to do a lot of that. And then we have to do marketing automation against that and allow it to warm those folks up for the sales team and set the right context. So you're building a new motion there. It's going to take a little bit of time, but wow, it's going to have really high return, and it's going to scale. I know you all and a lot of folks listening are on the startup side. You need, a year or 2 or 3 worth of runway, not for your demand, not, 3 months, and then you're kind of hit the ends of what leads you can generate for a reasonable cost, and then you kind of die off,
And when we tell CMOs that it takes 2-3 years to ramp up this whole motion, they're like, bye. Goodbye. I'm out. I'm a startup. I don't have 2-3 years.
No, well, it doesn't take. I don't think it takes 2 or 3 years to ramp up the motion. I think adding a new motion buys you 2 to 3 years of runway. And so I think to ramp a motion like this, if you're scrappy, I think you can do it in 60 to 90 days.
Okay.
Where you can start getting return, and then you start getting scaled return kind of 4 to 6 months in, if you're doing it right.
So you're kind of alluding to certain channels or ways to get your story across. And I'd like to ask you maybe a little bit more to the direction of how do they get that story right? Because I find that in a lot of cases, maybe, I'm biased towards companies who are younger, because we work a lot with younger companies, and just try to think HubSpot 8 years ago, 10 years ago, that kind of stage where, HubSpot had a great dream path, but, a lot of companies at that earlier stage, they tell a certain story. They think they know what their unique value proposition is and their ideal customer, and they're telling that story. And at some point, the math doesn't work anymore, or the cost of acquisition is very, very high. And it makes sense to start looking for new niches of audiences or new ideas to talk about, new value propositions, twist them a little. Now, to come up with the idea, you mentioned it as if, okay, you figure out your differentiation and then you run with the new move, okay? But I want to ask you about figuring out this differentiation part. I don't want you to skip that so quickly. Figuring out the story you want to tell requires a lot of insight to the worldview of your target audience. And because I'm working with companies who are selling technology, usually to enterprises, we're talking about understanding worldview of professionals who are highly experts on some professional domain, and to understand their worldview is difficult.
Yeah.
So I'd like to ask you if you have any ideas of how effectively companies can get these insights, which the marketing team usually, they're very challenged to get that, because they're always talking to the people who are coming through their funnel. They are people who are already in a certain mind, like a very specific segment. And now to move to a different segment, they're not familiar with that. And if we tell them, you gotta go talk to these people, they're not sure how to get to them. It's difficult to get to them. And they tell me, if I could get in front of that person, I would send them to my sales team. Right? So that is a very common challenge that I see with these companies. The marketing teams in these tech companies are often not very, very highly connected with the target audience as the product teams would be. And we'd like to help them get in front of that audience in order to figure out the differentiation. So do you have any thoughts about how to do that really effectively?
Yeah, look, positioning is an exercise in intellectual honesty. Are you really willing to be honest with yourself and your business? And you brought up the nature of technology companies. The first question you have to ask yourself is, do I have a solution in search of a problem, or do I have a problem and am I working on a solution? And a lot of technology companies have a solution in search of a problem, that they have a cool idea, but that the acute pain that they're solving for their customer, there might be value for their customer. Don't conflate value and pain. You can't build a great business off of some value. You can build it off of solving a huge amount of pain, or by providing 10, 20, 30x value, but you can't say, oh, this is valuable, and so people are going to buy it. So the first step here is, do you actually are you clear on the pain that you are solving, and is your product and company mission kind of aligned with that pain? The second thing is, assume that that's true. If that is true, then you are saying, there are two types of ways to position an early stage company in this regard. You are either a better mousetrap business or a transformational business. The former being, oh, I am 10x better, cheaper, faster, whatever, of things that people already know and use. Or I am a completely different new thing that people don't yet know that they need, but man, when they need it, that's going to work. HubSpot was the latter. HubSpot was a transformational business. We said, hey, there's this thing called inbound marketing. The internet has completely changed how people shop and buy, and you have to transform your marketing to win in this new world. And so neither path is good or bad, but you have to be clear, are you a better mousetrap business or you're a transformational business? And then once you are clear on that path, then you have to work on the story. And the story, I think that the step most people have the hardest time with is the conciseness of the story. What I would say is, give yourself 10 slides. And how do you tell that story in 10 slides? 10 slides, 5 minutes, what is that story? And you need people nodding their head at each slide. Oh yeah, I feel that pain. Oh yeah, I get that, right? And if that's the case, then you've got it. But it normally takes a lot of iterations to actually get a story to that level of resonance with an audience.
Right. I agree with you. And I'll also comment that the majority of the companies that we meet think they're in a transformational kind of company, but they're really not.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I think that's a very common thing that happens, for sure.
Right. So it's sometimes our role to tell them to their face that they're not, and that in order to differentiate, they need to really zoom in on a very specific niche within that area so that they can tell a unique story.
Correct.
Okay.
I love that advice.
Okay. So, all right, let me jump to a slightly different topic. I've had some of our team members visit Inbound, and we've been following online with you. And you guys have talked a lot about the cookieless, privacy first world. And do you think that as privacy is becoming more of an issue with target audiences, and especially I work with a lot of cybersecurity kind of audiences, and they're very obsessed with their privacy.
Yeah, of course.
And do you think that marketers will now need to find totally different ways to do marketing? I mean, should they be preparing for totally different ways on how to reach these audiences?
No, look, I think that if you're a marketer today, I would say that there's a few things that happen here. The first basically being, you have to care more about your data and systems than ever before. In a world where data privacy is less of a factor, you can rely on third-party data sources. You can rely on third-party targeting. You can do a lot of things that you don't have to own and manage yourself. In a world where data privacy is king, which is the world that I think we live in and are moving to, then having clean, accurate, permission data is everything. And that's going to be a shift for a lot of marketers, right? Because they're not used to having to deal with the technical side of that as much. I think marketers have gotten incredibly technical, and there's amazing technical marketers, but this now becomes a really clear strategic imperative, and they might have to invest more time to get things where they need to be. And
Yeah.
so I think that's the biggest kind of consideration.
Okay. Do you think that also, I mean, I see a big trust issue now with the audiences. Do you feel like there's new ways that marketers need to address how to earn trust looking forward? Because trust is becoming more and more difficult nowadays, that everybody's suspecting that any publication they see, they suspect immediately that it's false, that it's manipulative, that it's salesy.
Yeah, look, there's been a bunch of studies on this. Trust in television news is down. Trust in newspapers is down exponentially. Trust in branded content is down. And what you're really, you're kind of pushing on this issue of trust. And in every cultural evolution in our civilization, there's some group of people who are kind of the barometers of trust. Whether it be government, whether it be media, whether it be companies themselves, like we've seen all of those folks be barometers of trust. We are moving to a world where trust is going to be facilitated by, I think, fundamentally two things. Right now, for better or worse, I think trust sits with creators and individual folks who kind of are doing very niche creation and content and education around topics, and people are trusting them as a less biased source than traditional media, because I think they have better and different incentives, better points of view. And this is neither bad nor good. I just think this is what's happened today. And so I think if you're looking to build trust, it's going to be hard to build trust without being an active part of the creator economy. The second part of this is the ultimate way to build trust is transparency. Like if you have a real transparent log of things, and that's where, I think some of the decentralized technology, blockchain technologies come into play, because
I was hoping you'd get to that.
Because they offer a ton of transparency, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, great. My data is on chain. I can edit that data. People can access it based on whatever contract rules I set. There's a bunch of different ways that I think will evolve in the future, for example. But you're going to need that level of transparency long-term to actually build trust.
So do you think that marketers, what if marketers want to prepare for that? what would you recommend them to start thinking of or start studying, in that direction?
Here's the thing for everybody listening around emerging technologies right now. The emerging technologies kind of been branded Web3. I think it's a fine brand for it. But anytime you're in an emerging technology, you have to remember, I'm somebody who believes every situation has an unfair advantage. If you take a second and say, what is the unfair advantage of the situation? And when it comes to emerging technology, the unfair advantage is it's a level playing field of knowledge. Very few people have this 10x level of knowledge than everybody else because it's so early. Everybody kind of has a similar understanding. So you first start out with a mindset of, oh, I can actually learn very quickly, and I can be somebody who is knowledgeable about this pretty quickly because there's not that many people.
You're referring to blockchain right now?
I'm referring to any emerging technology. It might be blockchain. It might be NFTs. It might be any type of decentralized technology, which is everything I put in the emerging technology bucket, for example. And you do that in emerging technology, not by like reading and studying, but you do it by doing. You say, oh, I'm going to set up a wallet and I'm going to figure out what it's like to make an NFT and save this NFT to a wallet and how that works, right? And you can do most of this for free or close to free, right? You don't have to have, tens of thousands of dollars to do or learn these things. But if you go and do those things, join and participate in a DAO, which is a decentralized autonomous organization, which is a kind of like a fully transparent LLC or way of organizing, right? And I think that those things help you understand the technology implications and how that technology might impact society, because technology is worthless if it doesn't impact society. And your job as a marketer is to figure out where those two things come together.
Wow. So is HubSpot doing anything in that direction? Anything that you can tell us?
Lots of fun stuff in the future. But nothing to share today, unfortunately.
Like I had an idea, tell me if this is stupid or could it make sense, to create a coin for Penguin, like that would be a token that our clients, we price our services in credit today. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So we exchange, our clients have a batch of credits that they buy different services for. And I was like playing with the idea that maybe we could tokenize some of the credits and let people earn credits, and then they can get services for those virtual coins. Do you think that could be a good direction for us to go? Is that really interesting? Could it be, do you see potential in that direction?
Look, I think there's potential in any direction. I think you have to be clear on like what the utility is of that technology, right? And what problems you're trying to solve. And so, you all are a service-based business who are providing service help to growing companies. It's an awesome business. With that business, there's challenges in any type of service-based business. It's predicting cash flow. It is hiring and training employees. All of those things become a big issue in those types of businesses, right? And so you have to say, great, can I use decentralized technology to help solve some of those problems? So for example, like if you're a client and maybe you get an NFT for every year that you're a client, and with that NFT comes additional credits because that being a long-term committed client makes the ability for you to retain your best staff much easier. And you can do the math in the background and say, oh, it's worth giving them like 5% more credits because it's worth 25% more to us, for example, right? And it's that type of kind of like strategy lesson that I think is really important with any technology, whether it be something that's been around for 20 years or if it's something that's emerging and out in the world today.
Wow. Cool. Thank you for the ideas.
Of course.
We'll have to play around with that.
Look, I host a podcast called Marketing Against the Grain. We've done a bunch of different Web3 topics, and we had the very simplest way is I love this metaphor. There's a woman named Katie, who's the founder of Kairos, which is an NFT platform, and came on, and she was like, look, think an NFT as a token of appreciation for your clients and your customers, right? And you think about how it could replace swag. Like, I think about it as like, I have all these HubSpot t-shirts. Like, I wish I had digital versions of all of them. And I wish I could go see everybody I worked with 5 years ago who got that same shirt, who now I don't work with anymore, but we could like be in the same group or community together because we all held that, that specific NFT token and everything around that. And like, that's the type of value that we will have long term, with as this technology keeps improving.
I'm just picturing these t-shirt NFTs.
I just, those,
would they have sizes? Would they still fit?
No, it's just whatever the print on the shirt was is a digital image, but it's more about a banner of identity of like, oh, hey, I was at HubSpot in 2015 when we had these awesome shirts, and I can now see everybody I worked with in 2015 and it's easy for me to find where they are now, to ask them questions, to do all of those things that is actually very, very hard to do right now in the world.
I wanted to ask you, Kipp, about what is often referred to lately as the dark social, and what are some ways that you see companies are trying to track and utilize the dark social for marketing. We see more and more in our work with the B2B tech companies that when they try to engage with audiences the regular traditional ways, that they're less effective than when they turn to very private peer groups and very informal channels of communication. And those, for us, from the perspective of the marketer, those are channels that are super difficult to track and to utilize, systematically. Do you have any thoughts or maybe examples that you have come across of companies who've done something really creative and effective in that direction?
Look, this is a very big topic. It's a hard topic. I would try to frame this for everybody is that as a society, we go through cycles of aggregation and disaggregation. And what that means is like, when Google, Twitter, Facebook, all of these tools are aggregators. Google takes websites and aggregates them and makes them easy to find information. Same as Twitter makes, short form messages easy to bring together and discover and follow and everything there. We are entering a cycle of disaggregation and where things are decentralizing and fragmenting much, much more, which is the root cause of the question you just asked, which is like, oh, wow, that's very hard. So to try to give everybody listening some like tangible examples of what that means, like Google's losing search market share to Reddit, to TikTok, to other ways of discovering different types of information. Because Google's really good at website-based information. It's not as good as short form video. It's not as good as community-based responses to topics in the example like Reddit. So the best brands, I think, out there are very aware of their customer and their customers' daily habits, rituals. And if you serve a market where it's a very video dominant market, very visual focused market, then they're spending more time on YouTube and TikTok. YouTube's the second biggest search engine in the world, right? And we're talking about dark social. That's just one part of it. What you're really talking about is a massive decentralization of content and information, because we've had decades to create a bunch of awesome stuff that now lives on the internet, and the marginal cost for creating things is now zero, essentially. And so you have more and more stuff being created every day, more so than ever before. And I think that's like a lot of the opportunity here is around having a content strategy that's diversified.
Let me challenge you on that for a second. I'm not sure that I'm right, but I get a feeling that there's in the sectors where we serve, there's actually also an opposite trend of a convergence of sources of information and players. I kind of get signals that in a lot of niches, especially in technologies, that now, because of the people hesitating to trust sources of information that are very diverse and are new to them, they try to go for the mainstream of leaders, mainstream of thought leaders, and reach out to them. And there's some kind of convergence to in the tech niches, like a lot of segments where I saw like a year or 2 years ago that there were maybe 30 players that are offering a certain kind of solution. Now there's a convergence because people are reluctant to trust all these no names and trust all these tons of content creators, too many content creators. Everybody is content creator. So we don't know who to trust. So let's go to Gartner and listen to them, for example.
Yes, in times of uncertainty and change, which, if we want to circle back to kind of things we talked about earlier in this podcast, there's a lot of economic uncertainty. There's a lot of uncertainty around data privacy. There's a lot of technological change. We have a lot of emerging technology, whether it be Web3, whether it be the rise of multimedia and the creator economy, a lot of things happening there. And in times of change and uncertainty, people look for safe harbors. Right.
Exactly.
And I think that's the point you're making. And I'm saying that both of these things can be true. You can have really decentralized information and need new ways to aggregate it and show up there. And you're also going to have people who are going to look for tried and true, high trust signals. And you're going to have to play with some of those players for, the Gartners and the, analysts and stuff of the world, probably a little bit more than you had to play with them 5 years ago, and probably a little bit more than you'll have to play with them 5 years from now, because we're in this certain period of time. And I think so much of marketing is understanding the cultural zeitgeist and humanity and kind of like what people need and what people are craving in the situation we're in. So I would look at it as, for your market, if you're listening, where are the places of safety and certainty that people are going to go to, and how can you align your brand well with those? And those are going to be very different depending on the market that you serve.
Wow, I love that. Thank you. That's for me a new thought and a new takeaway that is helpful.
Thank you.
I'm now nearing the end of the interview, and I want to go a little bit more personal on your path, because I'm sure my listeners would love to know. Could you share a little bit of your path and what actually brought you to land in this job? I mean, how did you do this path? How did you go through this path? And what maybe you can recommend to others in terms of planning their path for becoming one day a marketer in a job as interesting as yours?
Yeah. So, if you think about being a marketing leader, first thing you have to understand is that marketing is one of the best meritocracies in the world. There's no governing board that tells you have to do X, Y, and Z things before you could be a marketer. You get to be one. And the work you do is actually pretty transparent. The results and everything are pretty available, and you can know how good you are at something. And so take advantage. That is an unfair advantage because, wow, you can just learn, try, experiment, and do much more aggressively than a lot of other highly regulated disciplines or vocations out in the world. So job one there. Second is, if you want to have mass acceleration in your career or your business, either one, you have to have a couple of things that you believe steadfast to be true, and the vast majority of people don't believe that to be true. And you need to be right over time. And so, for example, what does that mean? I joined Twitter in the spring of 2007. And this is when there were no, barely Facebook ads, no Twitter ads. AdWords was still early days. Online marketing was not a given, right? It was like, oh, online marketing will be kind of important, but nobody kind of understood it. And I believe that online marketing, social media, SEO would be transformative to how companies marketed their business. And I wrote a blog every day. I studied every day. I did everything I could to get better at those things because I fundamentally believe them to be true. And that turned out to be one of the best bets you could ever make because I was right. and allowed me to meet Brian and Dharmesh at HubSpot, have a transformative career, get to work with the best and smartest people that I could have ever had the opportunity to. And none of that happens if I just in 2007 say, oh, everybody's kind of doing direct mail and a little bit of email, and that's what I'm going to kind of dabble in, and like I'm just going to do what everybody else is doing.
So what are you
There's no
guessing in
leverage in there.
22 is the new thing that people should get really interested in?
Yeah, look, if I was, I don't know how old I was then. If I was, if I was in my 20s, if I was a young lad in my 20s, I would say, look, I would get really great at being a video creator, or I would get really great at Web3 and the decentralized web. I think both of those things are going to be big, huge things. I mean, I spend hours and hours a week creating content right now because I believe that it is going that like YouTube, TikTok, video communication is just a huge opportunity in the world. And so it's like, I don't know if I'm doing it, and
you're practicing your moves for TikTok.
Yeah, all of those things. Well, just like how, like learning it all, like learning how the algorithms work, learning how to engage a community really well on those channels. All of those things take time and practice, and I would bet in those areas because, wow, if you might not, I might be wrong, and that's okay. But if you're right, wow, the return is a life far better than you could ever imagine.
Right. Yeah, but you got to be right. Your bet.
You have to be right, but I don't know. Seems pretty obvious to me. As somebody who's been right a few times at this point, like it seems there are some clear things, and you don't have to be right as early as you think. Change takes a long time.
And also maybe there's room for, even if TikTok, you get really good at it and it doesn't become the platform for all kinds of companies, but just some, you're still.
Well, look, so let's break this down as an example. Let's say, hey, I'm going to be one of the best people at marketing on TikTok. Great. I think that is a solvable thing, right? What do you have to do? You have to understand community. You have to understand engagement. You have to understand telling a really engaging story in a really short period of time. This format happens to be video. So if you strip all of those things away, those are incredible life skills.
Yeah.
Like, it's not like you're wasting your time. It's not like having those things are not going to serve you exceptionally well. They are. The thing that you are uncertain of is how well they're going to personally benefit you by making those investments in time.
Amazing. Kipp, this was a fascinating conversation, and I'm really honored that you gave me the time and shared your great thoughts with me. And I hope the audience will appreciate you doing that as much as I do. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
You've been listening to the B2B Startup Growth Podcast, bringing you the latest wisdom on marketing, sales, growth hacking, and life as a startup leader. I'm your host, Shoham Eckhaus, and if there's a particular topic that you'd like me to cover soon, please reach out to me on b2bstartupgrowth.com and let me know.